Picture this. It's 2005. Detroit has spent the last 3 decades getting absolutely humiliated by Europe in the supercar game. Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, they've been running laps around American performance while Detroit fumbled with mediocrity. Then Ford walks into the room with a $150,000 supercar and proceeds to destroy cars costing 3 times as much. Ford didn't just beat Europe, they humiliated it, and then they stopped building the car. This is the story of Detroit's revenge, served ice cold at 205 miles per hour. Let me paint you a picture of where Ford was in the early 2000s. This is the same company that built the GT40, the car that went to Le Mans in 1966 and made Ferrari cry. But by 2000, Ford's performance reputation was buried somewhere between the Pinto and the Mustang II. They needed a halo car, something that screamed, Detroit still knows how to build something world-class. So they did what any company celebrating its 100th anniversary would do. They resurrected a legend. The 2005 Ford GT was designed by Camilo Pardo as an homage to the Le Mans-winning GT40 racing cars of the 1960s. And when I say homage, I mean they basically photocopied the homework and made it bigger. Same aerodynamic profile, same side scoops, same "we're here to win races" stance. Except this time, it was street legal. Manual transmission, no traction control. 550 horsepower of supercharged American Fury wrapped in aluminum bodywork. This was Ford's centennial celebration, and they were making it count. Now here's where it gets good. Ford didn't just build a pretty car that looked fast sitting still. They built something that could actually run with and beat the European elite. We're talking about a car that went 0 to 60 in 3.3 to 3.7 seconds depending on who tested it. Car and driver got 3.3. Motor Trend saw 3.7. Either way, that was Enzo territory. Ferrari Enzo. The $450,000 Ferrari Enzo. And Ford did it for 150 grand. Let that marinate. The heart of this beast was a 5.4-liter supercharged V8. Not just any V8. A DOHC 32-valve monster built at Ford's Romeo engine plant and force-fed air through an Eaton supercharger. 550 horsepower at 6,500 RPM, 500 pound-feet of torque at 3,750, dry sump lubrication, intercooled, port fuel injection managed by Ford's EECV system. This wasn't some parts bin special. This was genuine engineering, the kind Detroit used to do before accountants discovered spreadsheets. But here's what really separated the Ford GT from the pretenders. It actually worked. No electronic nannies. No traction control. Just a Ricardo 6-speed manual transmission, the same gearbox used in actual racing applications, connected to a helical limited-slip differential. You wanted to go fast? You better know how to drive, because this car came with one setting, violent, and Ford didn't apologize for it. The chassis was an aluminum space frame built by Metro Technologies in Troy, Michigan. 35 extrusions, 7 complex castings, 2 semi-solid formed castings, stamped aluminum panels. The whole thing weighed around 3,300 to 3,400 pounds depending on who was doing the weighing. For reference, that's lighter than most modern pickup trucks. And when you bolt 550 horsepower to 3,300 pounds, physics gets interesting real quick. Suspension, unequal length aluminum control arms, coilover monotube shocks from dynamic suspensions, adjustable, serious. The kind of setup that says, we're going racing, not, we're going to cars and coffee. Brakes were 14-inch vented cross-drilled rotors up front, 13.2 in the rear, 60 to 0 in 110 feet according to Motor Trend. That's stopping power that makes physics professors nervous. Now let's talk about what this thing could do, because the numbers are stupid. Top speed? Ford officially certified 205 miles per hour during testing at the Nardo test facility in Italy in June 2004. But here's the dirty secret. On multiple runs, the GT was hitting 208 to 212. Ford's vehicle dynamics supervisor Mark McGowan reported seeing over 210 miles per hour on multiple high-speed validation runs. Motor Trend independently tested it at the Arizona Proving Grounds with IndyCar driver Brian Herta behind the wheel. They got 200.1. So when Ford says 205 certified, what they really mean is, we're being conservative because we learned our lesson from the Cobra horsepower scandal. Quarter mile? 11.2 seconds at 131 miles per hour. That was Motor Trend's number in December 2004. Car and Driver saw 11.6 in their January 2004 comparison test. Either way, you're talking about low 11s in a street-legal car with a warranty, in 2005, while the old guard from Maranello was charging 3 times as much for similar performance. Detroit was finally playing the value game and winning. Take a breath, we're just getting started. But the real validation came in January 2004, when Car and Driver dragged the Ford GT to Gingerman Raceway for a comparison test against the Ferrari 360 Challenge Stradale and the Porsche 911 GT3. 3 of the hottest track weapons money could buy. And the Ford GT, the $150,000 American, absolutely destroyed them. First place, not even close. Car and Driver's exact quote, "It wasn't even a contest." They went on to say the GT's price tag begins to look like it belongs on a discount rack in Fellini's basement compared to the European competition. Let me give you the full context of what Ford just did. The Ferrari 360 Challenge Stradale, about 300 grand. The Porsche GT3, over 100 grand. And they both got walked by Detroit's Supercar on an actual racetrack. This wasn't straight-line bragging rights. This was corners, braking, handling, the whole package. The GT ran a 71.8 mile-per-hour slalom, second only to the Enzo and Carrera GT in testing. Ford built a car that could hang with $500,000 exotics for the price of a well-optioned Corvette. Now here's where Ford's engineers got clever. The GT generated more downforce than the Ferrari 360 Modena thanks to its front lip spoiler, flat underbody, and rear venturi tunnels. The aerodynamics were so good that at high speed, the car was practically glued to the tarmac. And they did it without a giant wing, just clean, functional design borrowed from actual racing. This wasn't styling for Instagram. This was engineering that worked. The interior was pure motorsport. Manually adjusted Sparco seats with carbon fiber shells, bare aluminum floors with rubber mats, a Macintosh CD stereo if you optioned it. Air conditioning, because Ford understood that street legality meant occasional comfort. But make no mistake, this wasn't a luxury car with performance. This was a race car with a license plate. Every surface, every switch, every detail said, "We're here to go fast. Everything else is optional." Production started in 2004 at the Wixom plant in Michigan, after chassis fabrication by Mayflower Vehicle Systems in Norwalk, Ohio, and paint by Celine Special Vehicles in Troy, hand-built by selected UAW employees. Each car was essentially a rolling advertisement for what American manufacturing could do when it gave a damn. And the plan was ambitious, 4,500 units over 3 years, 2004 through 2006. But here's where corporate reality met automotive dreams. Ford ended up building 4,038 units, not the planned 4,500. Why? Because new federal side impact standards were coming in 2007, and they would have required expensive modifications like side airbags and door reinforcements. Ford did the math and decided, end production in September 2006, rather than engineer compliance for year 3. So the GT became a 2-model year phenomenon, 2005 and 2006 only. The breakdown? 2,027 units in the 2005 model year, 2,011 in 2006. And buried in that 2006 production run was something special, the Heritage Edition. 343 cars finished in Heritage Blue with Wimbledon white stripes and orange racing roundels, a direct tribute to the Gulf Oil liveried GT40s that won Le Mans. And those 343 cars? They're worth stupid money today. Speaking of money, let's talk about what happened to GT values. Original MSRP was $149,995. Ford raised it to about 150 grand in late 2005. Still a bargain compared to European competition. But early on, these cars were selling for 100 grand over sticker. The very first one went for $500,000 at a charity auction to a retired Microsoft executive. By mid-2005, premiums dropped to 10 or 20 grand over MSRP. By August, some were selling at sticker on eBay. Supply caught up with hype real quick. Fast forward to 2025, and the market has spoken. Regular examples in excellent condition, around $450,000 to $560,000, according to Haggerty. That's $150,000 original sticker appreciating to $500,000. Not bad for 20 years. But Heritage Editions? Buckle up. A 2006 Heritage with just 71 miles sold for $1,001,000 at Macomb Kissimmee in January 2025. Another Heritage with under 2,000 miles brought $852,000. When you build 343 of something already rare, collectors lose their minds. But here's what really validates the GT. Celebrity provenance adds serious value. Paul Walker's 2005 GT, one of only 14 finished in Mark IV red without racing stripes, sold at a major auction for $634,500 with just 3,700 miles. When the same car sold previously? $478,000. That's 33% appreciation in just a few years. The market is telling you something. The Ford GT is a blue-chip investment car. Still with me? Because it gets better. Now let's address the elephant in the garage. Why didn't Ford just comply with the 2007 regulations and keep building these? Simple corporate math. Compliance engineering costs millions. Tooling modifications cost millions. Testing and certification cost millions. And Ford was about to enter the financial apocalypse that would nearly kill them in 2008 and 2009. They were already hemorrhaging cash. Extending GT production for maybe 1,000 more units? The spreadsheet said no. So the GT died in September 2006, not with a whimper, but with 205 miles per hour still echoing at Nardo. But here's what the GT proved. Detroit could still build world-class performance when it wanted to. The same city that fumbled the Mustang II. The same companies that watched Japan eat their lunch in the 80s. The same engineers who'd been designing rental car mediocrity for decades. They still had it in them. 550 supercharged horses, 205 certified miles per hour, 11-second quarter miles, and benchmark-beating lap times, all for a third of European supercar prices. The GT also reminded everyone what Ford was capable of when accountants temporarily lost control of the engineering department. No focus groups, no committee-designed compromises. Just build the fastest car we can and make it look like the GT40. The result was pure, focused, uncompromising. Everything modern cars aren't. Manual only. No traction control. No electronic nannies. Just 550 horsepower, 6 speeds, and your skill level. Sink or swim. And the design. Camilo Pardo deserves credit for creating something that looks as good today as it did in 2005. The GT hasn't aged. Those lines, those proportions, those side scoops. It's timeless in a way that most modern supercars aren't. You see a Ford GT on the street in 2025. It still stops traffic. Still looks exotic. Still looks expensive. That's rare. Most cars from 20 years ago look like rolling nostalgia. The GT just looks fast. Now here's a fun detail enthusiasts love. Ford specifically designed the left headlight cluster to read 100 when you looked at it. Seriously. The 100-element design was intentional. A subtle tribute to Ford Motor Company's centennial. Most people never notice. But when you know, you can't unsee it. That's the kind of attention to detail that separates special cars from mere transportation. The GT also sparked something else. It proved there was demand for American supercars. Not muscle cars, not sports cars, supercars. Capital S performance machines that could run with Europe's finest. This laid groundwork for what would come later, the second-generation GT that debuted in 2017. But that's another story for another episode. The point is, the 2005 GT reopened a door Detroit thought was permanently closed. And let's talk about what the GT did to the competition. The Italian benchmarks had owned the supercar space for decades. Lamborghini, Porsche. They set the standards. They defined what exotic meant. Then Ford shows up with something faster, better handling, and a third of the price. Suddenly Maranello had to explain why their cars cost $450,000 when Detroit was delivering similar performance for $150,000. That's market disruption. That's competition. That's exactly what the supercar world needed. The GT also benefited from perfect timing. This was Ford's centennial year, 2005, 100 years of Ford Motor Company. They weren't going to celebrate with a Taurus. They needed something that honored the company's racing heritage while proving Ford could still compete globally. The GT did both. It connected 1966 Le Mans glory to 21st century performance. It was a rolling history lesson, wrapped in aluminum and supercharged fury. But here's what makes the GT truly special. It didn't need excuses. It didn't need caveats. It didn't need, yeah, but for an American car. It was just fast. Period. Faster than Ferraris. Faster than Porsches. Faster than cars costing multiples of its price. No asterisks, no qualifications, just performance. That's rare for Detroit, and that's why enthusiasts still lose their minds over these cars 20 years later. Now let's address the elephant that didn't fit in the garage. Could you actually live with a Ford GT? Well, it's got air conditioning, a stereo, manually adjustable seats that'll fit most humans, ground clearance that'll navigate speed bumps if you're careful. So yeah, technically you could daily drive one. Financially, that would be the dumbest investment decision you could make. This is a 4,038-unit limited production supercar that's appreciating faster than your retirement account. Drive it on special occasions, baby it, preserve it, because these aren't making any more of them. The GT also proved that hand-built doesn't have to mean unreliable. These cars were assembled by skilled UAW workers at Wixom. Quality control was serious, tolerances were tight, and the result? GTs that actually worked. No Italian electrical gremlins, no British oil leaks, no German over-engineering that breaks when you look at it wrong. Just a supercharged American V8 that started every time and delivered 550 horses on demand. Reliability. What a concept. And the sound. Oh, the sound. A supercharged 5.4-liter V8 with an aftermarket exhaust, because let's be honest, most owners upgraded the exhaust immediately, makes noises that violate noise ordinances in 17 states. It's not a scream like a Ferrari V12. It's not a howl like a Lamborghini V10. It's a supercharger whine backed by American V8 thunder. It's mechanical violence. It's glorious. It's the sound of Detroit remembering what it was supposed to be. So what's the legacy of the 2005 Ford GT? It's proof that Detroit could, when properly motivated, build something world-class. It's evidence that American engineering hadn't completely lost the plot. It's a reminder that sometimes, just sometimes, corporate America gets it right. They built a car that honored racing heritage, delivered supercar performance, embarrassed European competition, and did it for a fraction of the price. And 20 years later, it's worth 3 to 6 times what it cost new, depending on spec and mileage. The Ford GT succeeded where so many others failed, because Ford didn't compromise. They didn't water it down. They didn't focus group it to death. They didn't let accountants kill it before it launched. They just built the best car they could, wrapped it in GT40 nostalgia, priced it aggressively, and let performance do the talking. 4,038 units. 2 model years. One hell of a statement. Detroit's revenge on Europe, served at 205 miles per hour. From the Nardo test facility, where it topped 208 on multiple validation runs, to Gingerman Raceway, where it destroyed the European establishment, the Ford GT delivered. 550 supercharged horses, 11-second quarter miles, 3.3 second 0 to 60 sprints, $150,000 price tag that made European exotics look like charity cases. This wasn't just a good car, this was a great car. This was Detroit proving it still belonged in the conversation. And collectors agree, because regular examples are worth $500,000, and heritage editions just cracked $1 million at auction. Not bad for a car that was supposed to be Ford's nostalgic anniversary gift to itself. The Ford GT, proof that Detroit could build a world-class supercar. Evidence that American engineering still had teeth. A rolling middle finger to everyone who said Ford couldn't compete with Europe. 550 horsepower, 205 miles per hour, 4,038 units built, and 20 years later, still one of the most collectible American performance cars ever made. This isn't nostalgia. This is proof that Detroit knew exactly what it was doing. Once. If you loved this deep dive into Detroit's supercar redemption, hit that subscribe button. Because next week we're covering the car that should have saved Plymouth, but arrived too late to matter. And yes, it involves V10s, bad timing, and corporate denial. You won't want to miss it. This is Supercar Chronicles, where we celebrate automotive excellence with maximum sarcasm and maximum respect.